Hi, everybody. This is David Nevins for Citybiz List. And my guest today is Terry Blackwell, the president and CEO of the Chimes. Many of you know the Chimes and many of you don't. So, Terry, let's just start with that premise. For our viewers less familiar, tell us a little bit about the organization, its history, what you're doing today, and where you're headed.
Certainly, David. Thank you. Chimes is perhaps one of Baltimore's best kept secrets. It's been in existence for almost 75 years. I think this is our 74th year of operation. It was founded actually in the Church of the Holy Redeemer up on Charles Street by a parent of a young man or a boy with a developmental disability. And she, as a parent, was informed, and which was very typical at the time. You know, you have a special needs child. For the good of your family, you're going to want to allow the state to take care of him in what they call developmental center, which is will come into play much in the history of how people with intellectual disabilities in this country were treated under the medical model. And she said, no, you know, I'm a mom and this is my son. And while he may be different, he's my son. He's staying with his family. And then God bless Lois Bacon. She created a classroom in that church. One classroom drew out other parents, and then 2, 4, 6 classrooms later, her attorney came to her and said, look, you know, this is getting too big to simply be an arbitrary endeavor. We have to incorporate it. What should we name it? And the bells happened to be going off, and thus Chimes was born. And today we operate in 7 states, inclusive of the District of Columbia. We provide services to over 24,000 unique individuals per year. We employ about 4,400 pre-pandemic. That was when our day programs and schools were open. So it is, as I said, a very well-kept secret for much of Baltimore, where people recognize our logo and our services, but don't really understand the depth of the organization.
So, Terry, just take a minute and maybe go through your primary services to Marylanders, but I also understand you're not just restricted to Maryland. You're operating in, well, I'll let you say, but much of the Mid-Atlantic and beyond.
That's correct. And Chimes International comes from the fact that we, as an organization, stood up Chimes of Israel 27 years ago, which still to this day functions autonomously, although in a memorandum of understanding with us, they introduced the concept of working collaboratively. Apart from that, in Maryland, we have a situation where we provide services to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. That includes autism, who are adults, and we provide both residential case management and day services. Pre-pandemic, again, day services have been shuttered for some time. The other 2 areas of business that we engage in are services to people with behavioral health, and that's predominantly in Pennsylvania. Behavioral health being an acronym when you combine mental health services with substance abuse recovery services and treatment services. And there's a large number of the 24,000 that are outpatient visits in Pennsylvania. And then last, but certainly not least, is our Chimes DC operation, which is a company that employs people who are disabled for the work. If you've been in and out of BWI Airport, you've probably seen our guys helping to maintain the airport, which this year was actually ranked as the #1 airport for its size in the entire United States. That program employs about 1,000 persons with disabilities throughout the footprint from North Carolina at Fort Bragg all the way up to New Jersey and Camden, where we operate supported housing.
I was going to ask you, Terry, about your airport program, because I think most Marylanders who are somewhat familiar with the Chimes or recall seeing your Chimes logo, they remember it from BWI Airport, where I understand you have more than a couple hundred folks you serve who clean the airport. And I just know, from being a regular traveler in and out of that airport, they're so friendly. They do a great job. They put flowers in the restrooms. Tell us a little bit about that program, because I think it's phenomenal in its reach.
To maybe back up a little bit, that program, when I came in, the BWI Airport contract did employ somewhere in the area of 200 persons with predominantly intellectual and developmental disabilities, providing janitorial and maintenance services. And I think over the past 3 years, we've really focused and been successful in coming to agreement and partnering with the Maryland Aviation Association, particularly through their Chief Operating Officer, Wayne Pinnell, and his staff, to the point where we do employ persons with developmental disabilities throughout all 3 shifts, around the clock, over the weekend. We've had some discussions and collaborations about how do we get transportation for some of the workers to come down on the weekends where the light rail may not be running or the bus lines may not be running. And it's just really evolved into a really great partnership, so that we were able to have that celebration when the airport was recognized by an independent third party as the best airport for its size in the United States. That's just, to accomplish that in an airport that has typically 27 million people coming through every year, was quite a partnering accomplishment. And it shows how successful our individuals can be when they're working and partnering with other people out in the community in an integrated fashion.
It really does. And kudos to the Chimes and kudos to the, as you noted, hundreds of men and women who do such a great job in working there. It's really phenomenal. So Terry, I understand that April is Autism Awareness Month. Mm-hmm. And the Chimes does a great deal for folks with autism. And you, as a professional in the field, can talk a little bit about the trends in this country of incidences of autism and how we're treating it and the progress that we're making and have made.
It's a passion, and it's a passion born out of a commitment to family as well as a commitment to professional development. That both my wife and I went back for a credential called the Board Certified Behavior Analyst in 2004. I ended up completing it. My wife ended up completing it. I used it then to kind of advance my career so that I ended up teaching at the Graduate School of Psychology at Seton Hall University, and then got deeply involved in New York City metro area around treatment of persons with autistic spectrum disorder. The unfortunate, maybe recounting a visit that I had not too long ago with Congressman Chris Smith from New Jersey, who chairs the Congressional Autism Committee, is a good data point for awareness. He and I were talking about back in 1980 or thereabouts, that the official statistic was that only 1 person out of every 10,000 would be diagnosed with autistic spectrum disorder, but that in the year 2020, 1 male being born out of 32 will be diagnosed with autistic spectrum disorder. And so the incidence has increased dramatically. And some of the things that are really impacting the field are, for example, those children who tonight will be born and diagnosed with autistic spectrum disorder will grow up and graduate from school. Our country doesn't do a really good job, nor do many countries, on transitioning those young adults into employment or education beyond school age. And so Chimes has really made a commitment to work both with Congressman Smith's office and whoever we can to help to develop transitioning programs for persons who have autistic spectrum disorder, who seek to either gainfully become employed in the community after their graduation from school, or who want to advance their services through their education through, let's say, a community college or a 4-year college. Our focus being more oriented towards the vocational track post secondary education.
You speak obviously with not only a great deal of passion, but expertise in the field. If you don't mind, let me just switch for a second from the Chimes to your own background. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit, if you don't mind, about how you got where you are today and how you acquired, obviously, the significant expertise that you currently have.
Certainly, David. I was very blessed to be admitted to a great program at the University of Pennsylvania, and upon graduation from that program, decided to work in the field of developmental disabilities in New York City. It turned out that the first program that was opened, a young reporter by the name of Geraldo Rivera at the time, made his first breakthrough report on a developmental center located in Staten Island called the Willowbrook Developmental Center. And it was an atrocity, and those videos are still available on YouTube. But people who were intellectually disabled who were living there were literally being washed with fire hoses, fed with trays of foods, sitting naked in these buildings, hundreds and hundreds of people with developmental disabilities. They created, because of a consent decree, a program to establish group homes in the community. And I was fortunate to begin work at the Chelsea program, which was the first group home opened in Manhattan after that. And it was an exciting time in the field because there were no rules, there were no regulations. So we could do things such as travel train somebody who'd been basically incarcerated in a developmental center and who was now 23 or 24. We could travel train them to use the subway, teach them how to purchase their own food, make their own meals, and do things that they never anticipated that they might do. I went from that to working as a consultant model with people who had very severe behavioral difficulties under the supervision of Dr. David Gill and Dr. Greg Birch, a psychiatrist and psychologist, and learned how to deal behaviorally for the first time with people with severe behavior. And I guess my enlightenment there was that to the learner, behavior is always functional. It may not make sense to us, but when somebody was exhibiting severe behavior, we would look to see what was the function of the behavior as opposed to simply sticking a label on it. And ultimately got involved with substance abuse treatment that led me to be a level 2 diplomat to the Soviet Union on an alcoholism treatment exchange, which was quite the eye-opener for me, and running a rehabilitation service, 52-bed rehab on the Bowery in New York. Ultimately I got licensed as a school principal in the state of New York permanently, working with special education for children who had limited English proficiency. And then ultimately working again with the intellectually disabled, supported housing, and behavioral health population in the capacity of chief operating officer in the city of New York for the second best nonprofit after Chimes, Services for the Underserved, which had Andrew Zimmern on our board, both as an advocate and as a really professional supporter of services to persons with behavioral health issues. This then led to Chimes, where I've really found a nice niche that I get to use all that variety of expertise in different locations and in different manners to seek to have one messaging and one standard of care, which is relatively simple. I put forward to people working for us, look, if you wouldn't have your brother or your sister or your mother or your daughter involved in the program you're working with, let us know, because that's our standard, that we would be very, very comfortable going to bed tonight knowing that our child was in one of our residential programs, as an example. But if you don't get on board with that message and that idea, that passion for quality, then let us help you find another place to be, because that's who we are going to be.
Wow. Well, again, thank you for bringing your services to the Chimes. They've benefited tremendously. Terry, before I let you go, I know that the Chimes is doing amazing work, and but you can't do it on your own. And much of the work you're able to do is the result of the generosity of any number of donors. So I want to remind our viewers that if they're interested, they should reach out to you at the Chimes and talk about that. But I'd also ask that you take a minute. I understand you have a new program for donors to contribute. It's maybe a little less painful than writing out a check. Can you mention that?
Indeed, David. Thank you. And I want to thank and recognize your organization for your help in setting this up. We have a cars donation program that we're just kicking off. In fact, I'm working with my own 29-year-old son to convince him that his 2004 Crown Victoria might be a nice donation to make. Simply checking our homepage, chimes.org, you could either call or we could facilitate a donation that basically helps both of us. For me, it would be a tax available deduction. And for the organization, we work with a professional agency that's nationwide on the conversion of those vehicles, which are donated into essentially support for the organization. So we see it as a win-win opportunity for friends of Chimes and for people not familiar with our organization to get involved and to support our mission to reach as many folks as we can.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. So for any of our viewers who have their old, you don't hear the word jalopies too much anymore, but that have those in the driveway, either still running or, correct me if I'm wrong, Terry, they don't even need to run. You'll come and tow them away. An opportunity to help the Chimes do the amazing work that it does, and an opportunity for a tax deduction at the same time. Terry, what did I forget to ask in our closing moments that you want to mention about the Chimes, and a thought that you'd like to leave our viewers with?
I think just the overview. I'm asked frequently by parents, what do I see as the future of the field, particularly parents of individuals with developmental disabilities? And I think that education in this country is well funded. I suspect that some of the recent changes to behavioral health programs are well funded. The challenge that we see on a longer term basis is the funding that supports people with intellectual disabilities and autism as adults. And so to the extent that folks are out there keeping their eyes on legislatively what's going on, I would encourage folks particularly to support an appropriate living wage for direct care staff. When I came into the field, if I trended that number forward, I started out as a direct care staff. The number trended forward for inflation is actually significantly higher than what we're able to pay through existing rates. And while we appreciate the partnership with the states we work with, we know that they also are looking to catch up, so to speak, with some of the other fields and compensate our staff at a level that they can go home and have a living wage.
Well, Terry, thank you for that last point, and thank you for being with us. I just know that I know so many folks, friends, and colleagues who have family members that you're serving at the Chimes, and I know so many of them don't know what they would do without the services you provide. So thank you and your colleagues for that. And with that, we'll say goodbye. Our guest today has been Terry Blackwell, President and CEO of the Chimes. And this has been David Nevins for Citybiz List. Thank you for being with us.